One of the fun things about this movie is that you've got these really educated, really intelligent, really philosophically minded people getting some of their core beliefs challenged.
One of our professors, John, the mystical man, is leaving, and we're here to determine why.
I think that in this story, we're sort of set with a big question, a question which I think would turn all of us upside down.
John just confided that he's 14,000 years old.
Oh, John, you don't look a day over 900.
I'm wondering why he was only a few years younger than I was 10 years ago, and now the space seems to be growing wider.
It's a script about ideas, and so one of the big challenges is how to make the ideas live and make them sound natural coming out of your mouth.
The idea of what if someone that you cared about said, I've been around for 14,000 years, and they're serious. Of course, you're going to think that they're crazy.
What if a man from the Upper Paleolithic survived until the present day?
It's an interesting idea. What are you working on? A science fiction story?
That was what Dad wanted to do with this story. He wanted to do a very optimistic, emotional story as a science fiction film, but without the gadgets, without the explosions, without the special effects.
There was a spark in the script, an idea, a chance to explore something.
Dad wanted to do a movie that talked about ideas, and really interesting ideas. I mean, is it right to live forever?
First, I thought there was something wrong with me. Maybe I was a bad guy for not dying. Then I began to wonder if I was cursed or perhaps blessed. There's not a book on how to play someone that's 14,000 years old, because I was just not. So it's kind of a challenge to try to find out why he's still moving on, why he's still in the game, what he values, why he's doing it.
It begs us to ask questions about why we're here. And I don't think there is any answer.
My understanding is that Jerome Bixby completed this script literally on his deathbed. And Emerson, his son, was there to help him through that process. And then after he died, Emerson took the script, and it was really important to him to see it get made.
That was the first thing that came to mind, was to do Man from Earth.
I read the script, I loved it right away. And I went and had a meeting with everybody, and I was as effusive as I could be about the material and how much I wanted to do it.
Richard was one of the few people I talked to who really saw the script for what it could be.
The producer Emerson was working with started getting ideas that this movie could be a bigger movie, that could get maybe a bigger director or a bigger budget or something like that.
My manager at the time, just find this guy, big budget, big budget, big budget, and I didn't want that. It's not only that it was my dad's last script, but it was a great script.
And so I kind of was squeezed out, and I sort of lost track of them.
The project got shelved, and then Richard got back in contact with me several years later, and instantly I'm like, yeah, the only guy in the world who had a brain that wanted to do this movie. You want the script? Hell yeah, here, take it.
I started pre-production immediately, and less than a year later, I was actually shooting the thing.
What grabbed me immediately when I walked into the room, onto the set, was I was looking at the actors talking, and it's like I was inside my dad's mind looking at what he'd written, and I really put a lot of trust in Richard. It's easy for somebody to say, well, yeah, I see this and I see that, but it's another thing to give somebody something you really believe in and hope they don't bugger it up.
To be able to make a movie that is a science fiction movie, technically, written by one of the great American science fiction writers, but that also addresses themes that are lifelong concerns of mine, it just makes for an ideal project. When you make a very low-budget movie, there are challenges that face you that you wouldn't necessarily have on a larger budget. The hundreds of decisions that you would ordinarily make every day on any film set. It just makes them all that much harder, because there's this financial imperative hanging over everything. And since I produced and directed the movie, I was constantly worrying about everything. I'm not just worrying about performance and about the shot and about, am I getting the coverage that I want as a filmmaker, but I'm worried about, are we late for lunch? Are we going long and I'm going to have to pay overtime? Or do the actors have conflicts?
Do me a favor and try to park right here.
Okay.
We had this great location, a rustic cabin in the middle of nowhere in the desert of California, exactly as described in the script. But it was truly a rustic cabin. So there was no water, there was no electricity, there was no plumbing. So even though this was an incredibly low-budget movie, we had to bring in everything. We had to bring in bathrooms, and we had to bring in dressing rooms. And it was a challenge because I hadn't budgeted for any of that stuff. I had to find the money somewhere, to make the actors comfortable. Because if the actors aren't comfortable, if they don't have a comfortable place to go to the bathroom, they can't concentrate. They can't do their work.
Why didn't I go pee?
Craft services was an ongoing issue on this movie, but I actually liked lunch. I thought that the caterer did a really nice job.
Don't get me started on lunch.
I think that some people had something to say about the catering.
I think that people in jail eat better than we've been eating.
Now, the first AD had designed the menu for the first few days, so we ended up with these meals that had both potatoes and noodles and another kind of noodles and pasta, and I thought, that's a lot of starch.
It was meant to arrive hot and with knives and napkins.
It's very good. It's very good. It's chicken, it's rice, it's salad, nutritious, it's warm, no complaints.
But I thought the caterer did a really good job.
Lunch.
We were in Antelope Valley, where there was a time when people could head up from LA and get really large tracts of land up there. And so our next door neighbor at the location was a successful Hollywood stunt coordinator, I think, who had gone up there and built this big house and a big piece of land, and had built a professional quality dirt racing track in the backyard for his two boys. God bless them. They're lucky kids. Unfortunately, it's really loud, so we had some issues where we'd be in the middle of shooting and the dirt bikes would start going, and these people were very nice people. They were lovely people, but it's their backyard and their track, and the kids are off from school and only have certain opportunities to do the dirt bike racing. So they want to do it when they want to do it. And so you have to go over with humility, with genuine humility, and ask them if they would please, please, please stop. And the thing that you forget is that you're there for this amount of time making a movie. But last week, somebody else was in the same location making a movie. And next week, somebody else is going to be at the same location making a movie. And every single time, they're going to the neighbors saying, hey, we're making a movie, can you not race your bikes? Well, then when are they supposed to race their bikes? You put yourself in the other guy's shoes for a minute and a half, and you see that things are not so black and white. It's I don't mean to tie everything back thematically to the movie, but the fact of the matter is, we all need to have a certain amount of humility, and we all need to acknowledge that the other guy has just as much of a right to do what he's doing as you have to do what you're doing. And it applies even when you're asking young men to stop their dirt bike.
I'd known Jerome Bixby's work primarily from the story It's a Good Life. I didn't realize he had a Star Trek connection until I took the job.
Like a lot of people, I grew up just being a really big Star Trek fan. I would say that my most personal connection to Star Trek is that I was at the first Star Trek convention in New York City, which makes me whatever you want to call me. But in fact, I had the little badge, the thing that they gave out at the registration badge. And my wife, the woman who became my wife, is a really big Star Trek fan as well. So on one of our very first dates, I actually gave her my registration badge from the first ever Star Trek convention, and it made an impression on her.
I've been blessed to be on all three incarnations, the modern versions of Star Trek. The first one was before my time, playing everything from Worf's brother, Commander Kurn, who's a favorite among the fans, to my favorite episode, The Visitor, which won People's Award and Critics Award as the best Star Trek episode ever. Flattered by that.
They put me in a show called Inner Light, in which I played Bataille, who was Captain Picard's best friend on this imaginary planet. They ended up using me again on Voyager for a holodeck in which I played an Irish town, and then a couple episodes of the latest Star Trek, in which I played John Billingsley's mentor in a hospital satellite.
I have a Star Trek connection because I played Dr. Phlox on the installment that killed the franchise, Enterprise.
I think most people would agree that the best episode Jerome Bixby wrote was Mirror Mirror, and in fact every iteration of Star Trek that's followed, Next Gen and Deep Space, all of them have all done Mirror Universe episodes. Well, all of those episodes, that whole mythology, all comes from Mirror, Mirror, which Jerome Bixby wrote. So he's incredibly important to the Star Trek mythology.
My mother, who passed away about 10 years ago now, was a huge Star Trek fan. One of her favorite episodes was Mirror, Mirror, which coincidentally was written by Jerome Bixby. And when I had read the script and then I learned about the connection to Star Trek and, to one of her favorite episodes, I was really drawn to that for that reason.
Well, I was a real Twilight Zone fan. I remember one Memorial Day I was down at my brother's house visiting, and they had a Twilight Zone marathon on, and I thought, well, I'll watch a couple, and I wound up spending the entire holiday in front of the TV because I just loved Twilight Zone. And when I found out that this was the same writer who wrote the episode about the boy who sent people off into the cornfield, I was enraptured. So.
Dad found out It's a Good Life was going to be the basis of one of Rod Serling's Twilight Zones. Dad's like, cool, sure, I'm going to write it. And so Dad starts making notes to do the script, and then he finds out Rod Serling wrote it already. He did the script before he even had the rights. And Serling gives the script to my dad and says, if you don't like it, then, you can do it. And Dad's like, good, I hope it sucks. He reads it, like, damn, because the script was great.
Growing up watching Star Trek with my dad or watching The Twilight Zone, I love it because I loved them. Because you'd see a story, and as far-fetched or crazy as it seemed, they always brought it back to reality, to where you think, wow, this really could happen.
When science fiction is interesting, it offers possibility, and it offers a perspective or an experience outside the box.